They buried the truth beneath the cotton rows, but the land still whispers what happened. October 1846. 5 overseers hacked apart with sickles on the harvest night. Their bodies left mangled in the furrows, their blood soaking into Alabama's soil, already thick with centuries of suffering. No trial, no record, just silence. A silence too deliberate to be anything but fear. Ask yourself, what kind of revolt leaves no names, no testimonies, no captured suspects, only the reek of iron in the dirt and whispers that never fade? Hollow Creek Plantation, Barber County. You've read about such estates, but never like this. 200 enslaved men and women worked these fields, watched over by a small circle of overseers infamous for their cruelty. The whip cracked here so often it was said even the crows would fall silent at its sound. Yet the real violence did not come from leather. It came from a kind of ritual humiliation that hollowed out the spirit. Overseers like Enoch Merritt and Daniel Cobb were not men who punished. They were men who rehearsed pain like a trade. But on one harvest night, the script flipped and the reapers were reaped. This was no ordinary uprising. Revolts happened elsewhere. Nat Turner's name was whispered like a warning, but Hollow Creek was different. Survivors never spoke. Locals avoided the place. Even the Alabama archives mark the plantation as Operation Suspended for that year, a cold bureaucratic phrase covering a massacre. Farmers who tried to plow the land later swore the earth turned their blades aside, like the soil itself resisted being disturbed. But what was it? Was it vengeance, or was it something older that woke beneath the rows of white cotton? Something carried in the breath of the enslaved, in their secret songs, in the strange symbols carved into barn doors no one admitted drawing. You are not hearing a story tonight. You are idokis inyai. I'm pulled into a wound in history that was never allowed to heal and perhaps was never meant to. Hollow Creek's revolt is a tale that shifts shape, justice for some, horror for others, ritual for those who dare to look too close. And now that you've heard the first whisper, you cannot walk away. Dawn broke over Hollow Creek with a sky the color of ash. The cotton glistened with dew, but the air carried something metallic, as though the fields themselves had bled in the night. By mid-morning, 5 overseers lay butchered across the plantation grounds. Their throats split, their torsos opened, limbs bent at angles no human hand could force. Each death bore the same signature, the sickle. Tools of harvest, curved like a crescent moon, now used to carve men into offerings. What unsettled investigators most was not the slaughter itself, it was the precision. None of the overseers died quickly. Cobb's ribs had been pried apart like gates. Merritt's wrists were slit in ritual alignment, his corpse laid near the cane press as if marking a boundary. Another body was hung inverted in the smokehouse, his eyes plucked clean, his face stuffed with cotton. These were not the frenzied strikes of rage. They were deliberate acts, orchestrated with a patience that mocked the very idea of justice. The enslaved? Gone. Quarters abandoned. Beds still warm, but the people vanished like mist before sun. Nearly 200 men, women and children, swallowed whole by the wilderness. Only a few belongings left scattered. Carved bone charms, scraps of cloth dyed with unfamiliar symbols, and one phrase scratched into the dirt near the barn doors. Ex sanguine libertas, from blood, freedom. But was this rebellion or invocation? Survivors from nearby farms claimed they heard chanting that night, low, rhythmic, not English, not African tongues they recognized, but something older, deeper. The sound carried across the swamp like the earth itself was humming. When the militia finally stormed the plantation weeks later, they found the soil churned, the fields warped into unnatural ridges as though something had clawed upward from beneath. Crops withered before ripening, plows snapped on unseen, and stones that had not been there before. Even now, locals swear that nothing will grow where the overseer's blood was spilled. And the few who were captured, 14 souls found near the Chattahoochee River, they did not plead, they did not beg, they stared through their captors with the calm of people who had already completed their purpose. They were hanged in silence, their names erased. Remember this, viewer. Not all rebellions seek survival. Some seek transformation. Some are not against flesh and blood alone, but against the very order of the world. What happened at Hollow Creek was not only a strike at oppressors, it was the planting of a darker seed. In the months before the Harvest Massacre, something strange began to stir in the slave quarters of Hollow Creek. The usual hymns, those sorrowful prayers carried from dusk to dawn, grew quiet. In their place rose a new rhythm, wordless, pulsing, steady as a heartbeat. Overseers dismissed it as humming, but those who listened closely swore it was more than song. It was incantation. Sarah Alcott, a visiting relative whose journal later surfaced in abolitionist circles, wrote of sleepless nights where the sound seemed to shake the very walls. They do not sing to heaven, they sing to the earth. It feels as though roots move beneath the floorboards. She sketched symbols scratched into the barn doors, spirals, hooks, and branching sigils no one could match to alphabet or scripture. When she showed them to her uncle, Elias Holé, he struck the page from her hands and forbade her to speak of it again. But the enslaved had always carried secrets in their songs, codes of escape, maps folded in melody. This time, though, the music carried no directions, no gospel hope of deliverance. It was lower, older, soaked with something dangerous, a rhythm not asking for freedom, but commanding it. The head overseer, Merritt, noticed the change. He responded with cruelty sharpened to spectacle. Men were whipped to bone, women locked in sheds without food or water. Josiah, the one who had dared meet Merritt's eyes, was dropped into a dry well for 3 nights. He never climbed out. Afterward, Merritt ordered the well sealed with stone, muttering that no one must ever touch it again. Yet nights later, neighbors claimed they heard wailing from beneath the ground. Not the voice of one man, but a chorus. Imagine it, a quarter full of people stripped of everything, yet their voices deepened into a weapon that rattled walls and froze hearts. These were not the cries of despair, they were rehear, sails, spells bound to rhythm, sharpened in silence until the harvest moon would rise. And that is when it becomes clear. The massacre of 1846 was not sudden violence. It was the flowering of something planted long before. A seed nourished in blood, watered with grief, ripened into wrath. But ask yourself, viewer, what if those rhythms were not only human invention? What if Hollow Creek's soil, the same earth that would later spit out plows and rot crops, was answering back? The night of October 12th, 1846, began like any other at Hollow Creek. Lanterns dimming, overseers drunk on power and cheap whiskey, the enslaved confined to their shacks. But silence spread too thick, too absolute. No coughs, no whispers, not even the rustle of a restless child. Merritt, pacing the quarters, noticed it first. The absence of sound itself was the omen. Then came the first strike. A scream split the dark near the eastern field, sharp enough to scatter crows from the tree line. Overseer Warren staggered into view, his lantern swinging wild. Before he could shout, something curved and glinting caught the light. Then his voice ended in a wet gurgle. He fell forward, chest opened like ripened fruit. The tool that killed him was not a weapon of war. It was a sickle, dripping, gleaming. Chaos surged. Overseers rushed to rouse one another, but the quarters were already empty. From the fields rose figures, rows of them, moving in rhythm, not running, not frantic, but deliberate, like dancers in some grim procession. The sickles flashed in unison, harvest tools raised not for crops, but for flesh. Every cut landed with intent, almost ceremonial. Merritt tried to rally his men. He screamed orders, fired his pistol into the night. But the air was heavy with something no bullet could stop. Witnesses later wrote of chanting rising from the fields, though no words could be made out. Just low vibrations, rolling like thunder under the ground. Cotton rows seemed to sway though the wind was still, as if the earth itself leaned in to watch. One by one, the overseers fell. Tilson dragged into the furrows, smothered beneath cotton bowls stuffed into his mouth. Ree suspended by his ankles in the smokehouse, throat carved with patterns too precise to be frenzy. Merritt himself fled toward the cane press, stumbling, shouting, but shadows closed in. He was silenced with strokes. So exact they resembled ritual sacrifice more than murder. And through it all, the enslaved did not scream. They did not speak. They moved with a grim unity that no whip had ever forced, as if guided by a rhythm older than memory. When the fires were set to the barns, flames painted the night sky red. From a distance, travelers mistook it for dawn breaking early. But dawn would never break the same on Hollow Creek again. The overseers were not simply killed, they were reaped. When morning came, Hollow Creek stood in ruins. The barns smoldered, black smoke curling into a sky too bright for the carnage below. The overseers' corpses lay scattered, 5 bodies broken, gutted, arranged like offerings. But the enslaved were gone. Nearly 200 souls vanished before the first rooster crowed. Their shacks were abandoned, meals left half prepared, blankets still warm. It was as if they had stepped out into the night and dissolved into mist. Neighbors who dared approach described the air as wrong. One woman wrote, "It smelled not of fire alone, but of iron, thick in the lungs, as if the land had swallowed a slaughter whole." The cane fields seemed disturbed, furrows torn as though by claws beneath the soil. No birds perched in the cypress trees that morning. Even the cicadas fell mute. Word spread quickly, but not in newspapers. Plantation owners whispered to each other in letters sealed with black wax. They called it an agricultural disturbance, too afraid to say the word revolt. Within days, rumors multiplied. Some swore they saw figures walking at night along the Chattahoochee, faces pale as moonlight, holding curved blades that caught no reflection. Others insisted the missing enslaved had marched into the swamps to join free maroon communities hidden in the wilderness. Yet more claimed no human hand could have orchestrated such precision, that the soil itself had risen against Hollow Creek's masters. When the Barber County militia finally arrived, 3 weeks later, they did not come to investigate. They came to silence. 30 armed men stormed the plantation grounds, only to find decay had set in unnaturally fast. The overseers' bodies were bloated, swarmed with flies, though weather had been cool. Crops rotted in the fields, blackened as if poisoned overnight. The main house stood intact, but reeked of smoke and iron. Then came the discovery. 14 people, hiding in a ravine near the river. They did not fight. They did not plead. They met their captors with a calm that unnerved the soldiers. Interrogation failed. Their silence was impenetrable. Some militia swore the captives' eyes reflected firelight, though no flame was near. Within hours, without trial, all 14 were hanged from the cypress trees. Their names were never written. Their graves never dug. The rest were never found. 200 souls erased, yet something remained. Because land remembers. And Hollow Creek would not release what it had tasted. Years passed, but Hollow Creek never healed. The plantation was sold, abandoned, swallowed by vines and swamp. Yet fragments of its story surfaced like bones, rising through shallow graves. In 1892, a pastor searching family records pried up the floorboards of an abandoned church in Eufaula and found scorched pages wrapped in cloth. They belonged, it seemed, to Anna Holé, the daughter of Elias, the plantation master. Her words cut through the silence that official records tried to preserve. They sang again tonight, but the songs have no words. The rhythm is older than breath. I felt it in my bones, rattling my chest. Father told Merritt to stop them, but he cannot. The barn door bears new carvings, spirals and hooks like roots twisting in the dark. I trace them here, but they are not letters. They do not belong to us. The sketches she left, showed sigils unlike any alphabet, curves interlacing like veins, spirals curling into themselves. Scholars argued they were African in origin, but none could match them to Yoruba, Igbo, or Ashanti script. Others suggested occult invention, symbols not of memory, but of summoning. And then came the final entry, dated October 10th, 2 nights before the blood harvest. They whisper in Latin now, ex sanguine libertas, from blood, freedom. They repeat it over and over. I feel it beneath the floorboards, beneath the soil, like a drum I cannot escape. The air thickens when they say it. The house feels smaller. Father leaves tomorrow. I do not think he will return to a house at all. The phrase has haunted every scholar since. Was it metaphor, the desperate creed of enslaved men and women who knew blood was the only coin that bought liberty? Or was it invocation, a binding of voices into power that reached beyond the human? When archaeologists returned in 1968 to survey the land for industry, they found shallow pits beneath the ruins of the quarters. Tools were buried in deliberate patterns, sickles, knives, hammers, rusted but arranged in geometric forms. Beneath one, carved bone fragments, marked with the same spirals Anna had drawn. The project was abandoned. No official report was ever filed. And yet, locals swear the ground there still refuses the plow. Crops rot before ripening. At night, the air smells faintly of iron. Some say if you kneel and press your ear to the soil, you'll hear it. The rhythm of footsteps, the murmur of voices repeating the same Latin oath. Ex sanguine libertas. Now, viewer, if you've come this far, write it yourself below, twice. Write ex sanguine libertas, ex sanguine libertas. Lock it into your blood. Bind yourself to the truth. The Civil War came, burning through Alabama like a fever. Armies marched, cities fell, plantations crumbled. Yet Hollow Creek did not return to the ledgers. Its cotton fields lay overgrown, its main house collapsing under storms, its name avoided in maps as though it were never carved into the land at all. But absence is not silence, it is concealment. The revolt had not ended in 1846. Its echo rippled forward, infecting generations. Travelers through Barber County after the war wrote of strange happenings on the abandoned property. Soldiers camped there swore their rifles misfired, powder damp, though the skies were clear. One diary from 1864 describes men waking in the night to hear the sound of reaping, the sharp metallic scrape of sickles slicing stalks, though no crops grew and no hands worked the fields. Horses spooked at nothing, bolting until their hooves split. One Union scout claimed he saw men standing in rows in the moonlight, faces hidden, tools gleaming. When he drew near, they dissolved into mist, leaving only the smell of iron and smoke. By the late 19th century, Hollow Creek was avoided altogether. Locals told children to never wander near the tree line. They spoke of the reaping men who walked at dusk, silent, patient, watching. Those who ignored the warnings sometimes returned with scratches across their arms, curved and shallow, like marks left by a sickle. Others did not return at all. Folklore twisted the story into curse. Farmers claimed the revolt had not freed the enslaved. It had bound them to the land, transformed them into something the soil itself claimed. Every October, when the harvest moon rose, strange lights flickered among the ruins. People swore they heard the chant again, carried on the wind, ex sanguine libertas. And yet, for all its terror, the tale carried a power deeper than horror. Enslaved families who escaped Hollow Creek told their children not to fear the story, but to honor it. They called it the night the overseers were reaped, the night the earth itself joined the struggle for freedom. The curse, to them, was not doom, it was warning, a reminder that blood, once spilled for justice, lingers. Understand this, viewer. Hollow Creek is not just a plantation lost to time. It is a wound stitched into the land, reopening each generation. When men think they own the soil remembers otherwise. And now we stand at the edge of Hollow Creek. Not in 1846, Not in the blood-soaked soil of Barber County, but here, now. The revolt did not end with sickles in the fields or bodies hanging from cypress branches. It lives wherever the story is spoken, wherever the chant is remembered, wherever someone dares to listen past the silence. Tonight, that someone is you. Think of what you have heard. The missing 200, swallowed whole by the earth. The Latin carved into bone. Ex sanguine libertas. From blood, freedom. The ground that will not plow, the crops that rot, the footsteps that echo without bodies to leave them. Think of Anna Holay's trembling hand, scratching symbols no one could translate, hearing songs that rattled her chest as if her ribs were a drum. She heard the uprising coming and could not stop it, and neither can you. Because listening is not harmless. To carry this story is to open yourself to it. Every revolt demands witness, and every curse demands host. Why do you think the archives tried to erase it? Why do you think the militia hanged the last 14 in silence? They were not just killing rebels, they were sealing a wound, binding a secret. But time breaks all bindings. Words seep back through cracks. Tonight, you broke the seal simply by hearing. Look behind you. No, really look. That prickle on your neck, that pressure in your chest, it is not imagination. The revolt is not past, it is presence. The reaping men do not stay in Alabama. They walk wherever the story is told. They wait for voices willing to speak the chant. So I will ask you once, and only once, will you repeat it? Will you let it pass your lips, as Anna heard it, as the missing 200 carved it, as the earth itself still whispers it? Say it, and you carry their vow. Refuse, and you remain only a spectator, one step removed from the wound. But you have listened this far. You know the choice was made long ago. Ex sanguine libertas. From blood, freedom. Say it, whisper it, and know the reaping has already begun.